Hi, welcome to Bridge Bike. Today we're going to go visit my friend Tim and talk about electric bike converters. We'll get a chance to talk about motors, motor controllers, batteries, all of that sort of stuff, and what it takes to convert a bike, in his case both for performance and because he's got an 18-mile each-way commute, and that's what he tunes his bikes for. In addition to that, Tim also cares a lot about energy independence. So his bikes are completely off the grid, they use no fossil fuels, etc. He's on his own to get himself to and from work. So we'll get a chance to look at how he does that and see how it might apply to us or to other things. Here we go, off to see Tim. So this is Tim. Tim's a friend of mine who does all sorts of bicycle things and alternative transportation, and he's got some stuff he wants to show us today. Okay. Tim, how long have you been doing bicycles?
Well, this is certainly not my job, but just a hobby, I guess. Converted a few bicycles, made some electric kayaks, and generally try to power things with solar energy.
How long have you been doing this?
Oh, well, really only a couple of years.
Yeah?
Well, it's not my job, but...
So in a couple of years, how many bikes do you think you've done?
4 or 5.
Yeah? And how much do you use them?
I try to commute every day to work when I can.
Yeah. So how many miles?
Right now it's about 18 miles.
18 miles. One way?
I think so.
Really?
Yes.
I thought it was a little closer than that, but
there are shortcuts.
Yeah. So 18 miles, and you've been doing a bunch of electric bike conversions and doing it because you want to do things that you want to do, right? So I think what we'll talk about is kind of what the bike is, why you use it, some things about charging and why you care about the charging and why that's a little bit different than maybe other people might think about it, and how you get it done and how well they work.
Okay.
Sound right?
I guess so.
Okay. Before we get talking a little bit about your charging systems and the parts and what it took to make these bikes, a question. Why is it that you wanted to go do this bike conversion and make these bikes in the particular way you are?
I don't think you can actually buy anything exactly like what we're looking at here. There are a lot of more electric bikes now sold. Actually, I think there's a legal limit on power in California that not necessarily needs to be held to if you build your own bike. But also, it's much less expensive. The electric bikes currently available are a lot of markup relative to the cost of the components. But also, I think it just gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want to put it together and particularly how you want to charge it.
So, Tim, we were talking about the parts it took to make the bicycle, and
okay. Well, I think it's probably nice to start by saying that most of the electric bikes right now, certainly the more powerful ones, have started to standardize on a 48-volt battery, and I think it's also a useful way to think about power and what power you require to operate your daily life. This is a 1 kilowatt-hour battery. It's a 48-volt, 20-amp-hour battery, and so that makes a nice base for any electric bike. It gives you about a 30-mile-an-hour range, 30-mile range. And the other useful thing about this is that it can actually be charged by a single solar panel in about 3 hours.
Excellent.
So you can completely operate off-grid, and I guess because we'll look at, we have a number of ways to do that around here.
Right. So on this latest thing you've made, you've got one hooked in. Are all the bikes the same? Same battery for you?
They all can use the same battery. there is another style over here on the down tube battery, or sort of like the bicycle water bottle area battery. But I think just having a rear rack battery like this generally makes the most sense. And you can easily switch them out and charge them indoors or whatever you like to do.
So these batteries you're using, what's the capacity of those batteries?
These are 20 amp hour batteries, so that means at 48 volts it's about 1 kilowatt hour.
More or less, what do these cost?
They cost about $400.
$400?
Yeah.
And if you wanted a lower capacity at 48 volts, what would be the least expensive?
I don't know, probably still about $350. You can get a lower voltage one cheaper, but that is, in general, the lower voltage ones would also come with a less powerful motor. So I think right now...
And you're using very powerful motors. What kind of motors are you using?
In general. So, for instance, both this bike and this bike has a 2,000 watt motor. Yes. This one is a 1,000 watt motor. This one here is a 500 watt motor. So, of course, with the lower power motors, you get much greater range. This little bike here will actually go about 45 miles with that battery. So that can be very useful. And yeah, I think it all depends on what type of commuting you'd like to do. Having the more powerful motor, it makes it possible to stay up with local traffic if you need to. But certainly you don't need anything more than 750 watts. All the Chinese motor suppliers right now have standardized pretty well in terms of the controller or the panel interface. So that I would use the same 5-wire connection there. And actually, at this point in time, most of the hub motors are also standardized, so that makes it easy. You can go between one and the other as long as they're all 48 volt. You can switch a lot of the components around, so that's helpful.
So is 24 volt going away and 36 volt going away, and everyone's moving to 48, or is it that you just chosen 48 because of your increased range and increased power desire?
I think 48 volt is becoming more the standard, and there's still a lot of bikes that use 36, especially 500 watt bikes use 36. But I mean, I think as a new standard, 48 makes sense. Yeah, you can always use a 48 volt battery with a 500 watt motor and go a lot further. It's just, I mean, that's what the setup is. That's a 500 watt. So that's perfect, actually.
So you take and just mix and match the voltage and the power of the thing, and
I would.
The controllers can.
No, I think pretty much everything is 48 volt.
But if you put a 36 volt battery on a 48 volt controller, so you just went to 48 volt. That was just what you wanted to do.
48 volt, yeah, it's more the standard. And so with a 48 volt battery, you can run a 2,000 watt bike, and you can run a 500 watt bike a lot further. So it just makes a lot of sense. The battery, this is actually a smaller battery, and I have it on the more powerful bike because, as I said, this one is a little bit set up for more fun riding at faster speeds and shorter distances. All these just started life as standard mountain bikes, at least this one is just designed to go faster and but not really quite have the range. So this one doesn't use the 20 amp hour battery. It uses a smaller battery, but it is a 48 volt battery. So this one would probably have a range more like 10 to 15 miles, but has it can go considerably faster. So this one is a nominally a 1500 watt motor that can go up to about 2000 watts. So again, the battery here is designed for a higher power delivery rate, and it has a somewhat larger motor controller as a result, which is sort of buried in here. But
this thing's basically that you have the hub motor, you have your 48 volt battery pack, you've got the controller, and that's all wired up to a throttle controller on the handlebars, and it's self-contained, and you're not using pedal assist or regenerative braking or anything. It's really the most simple install.
Yes, this one actually has the option of doing the regenerative braking, but I don't have the pedal assist hooked up. If you want to pedal, you can always pedal, so I don't see it.
It's just the control is decoupled.
Yeah, it's decoupled.
Okay, let's jump to this bike. So you built this bike in this form and form factor because you wanted a small bike for a particular commute, and so it's all the same parts except the 20-inch wheel.
This is more for a commuter bike where you might want to bring your bike in. Obviously, it's a collapsible bike, but yeah, you can use the same basic parts. This one has, again, the 48 volt battery, a 1 kilowatt hour battery. The motor on it is only about a 500 watt motor. Although I use a somewhat higher power motor controller to give you the flexibility. It's pretty easy to put together. And the batteries have started coming with this holder, which is a little bit superfluous for this particular bike, but probably easier to use it than not.
And did you have a hard time getting in the 20-inch wheel? Because all your other ones, I think, are 26-inch wheels.
Yeah, that is an issue. Actually, if I had to do this over again, what I would probably do is to buy a standard, just buy the hub motor, buy the rim, and put it on the wheel myself. Because right now you pay a premium. So. And
it's the same thing as your other bikes in that it's battery controller, wiring harness, and then the twist grip with the visual controller and the panel that tells you kind of what's going on.
Right.
And all all the parts on all your bikes are kind of interchangeable because you're using 48 volts.
Yeah, at 48 volt you can make them pretty much interchangeable. All the standard connections to whatever kind of handlebar mounted panel that you have, at this point it's fairly standard, and the wires to the motor are fairly standard as long as it's 48 volt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just came from the garden share, honey, and somebody sent you a tomato plant.
Okay.
Yay!
Woo! Nice bike.
Yeah, so Tim was just explaining the parts on this bike.
Oh.
And in terms of wiring these things, what did you have to do to go ahead and connect them up?
Okay, well this is probably the standard setup. This one is a 1,000 watt motor, 1,000 watt motor controller, and of course the standard 48 volt battery. Pretty straightforward. Here was the wheel that came with the bike. Pretty easy. Switch out the old wheel for the electric hub wheel. What is a bit of a struggle usually when converting an electric bike is if you have a disc brake and you do really want a disc brake with an electric bike, is to make everything fit together. Often this involves having to spread the rear forks a little bit. So you want to get the spacing there right. And typically there is some frustration and adjustment involved with getting the disc brake to align with the disc brake clamp, but always doable. Mm-hmm. Use a few spacing washers and such.
So you basically take the old wheel off, you spread the rear forks to fit the width.
Yep. You put on the disc brake on the new hub motor.
You fuss around with the disc brake to make it realign with the new spacing.
Yeah. And then whatever number of gears you have, oftentimes the electric bike may require a reduction in the number of gears. I think I went from whatever they came on here down to 5, but that's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. Usually the hub motors will come with their own sprockets. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And then wiring for that, just on the motor side, forget the other side, to wire the controller and the battery down into the motor?
So the motors, all the wiring to the hub motor comes down through one cable. The cable has the 3 power leads, sort of in a sense an AC sequence power lead, and 5 control wires, all coming down through a single cable. Actually, it's in this case it's actually disconnectable right here, mm-hmm. so that if you need to change your tire, you can do that a little bit easier.
And that goes through the skewer into the motor.
Yes, right. Yes, and then so the cable then just runs up here to the motor controller. So this is as I mentioned, a 1,000 watt motor controller. Here we have the 3 main power wires coming out of the controller, going down into that wire, and also all the control wires. So it's basically a 8-wire system going to the motor. And then here, which is connected right now, is the controller, the 5-wire control wires going to the front-mounted panel that also turns everything on and off. And we have other things. So in general, the controllers will come with 2 connections for the brakes. You would need to use at least one for sure, and that cuts off the power to the controller to the motor when you put your brake on. You really don't want to leave those off because I've had a number of issues with sticky throttles and things mm-hmm. that you really would want to have that cutoff feature. So.
And then the other thing was the brakes, getting the brakes to fit. So what did you do on the brake?
Usually you can just use spacer washers, and they're actually fairly adjustable as long as you're using the cable brake type. Now, many mountain bikes, as the other bike I showed you, has a pneumatic brake, and that's okay, except the thing is that the electric cutoffs for the motor don't typically have any way of working with a pneumatic brake. So it's nice to have a cable brake in that respect, where you can have either a sensor at the back cable pull, or just have the sensor at the point where you're at the front. I think probably a standard on many better mountain bikes now are the pneumatic brakes. So the mineral oil filled brakes. The only issue there is then you don't have a way of actually connecting your power cutoff. So what I've done typically is to use one manual one. That actually makes it somewhat easier, because if you need to position your new disc brake somewhere differently than it came, it helps then to buy a mechanical cable brake.
Got it.
cable disc brake, and that way you also have the automatic electrical.
So Tim, what is that solar panel?
Well, it's just a set power solar panel. I think this is a 300 watt model, and that's what I use to charge the 48 volt bike battery. So you can charge from that panel again with a charge controller that you can also see back by the chicken coop. That's just a charge controller that you can set for any type of battery. This one's, of course, set for a...
So that's hooked to the panel on the roof of the truck.
Right. And it's set to charge a 48 volt lithium battery. And here's just one of the bike batteries that I can charge in the back seat. And what I also use this for is to run a DC refrigerator that we often take on camping trips, but mostly it's for charging bicycles. So it's just one way to keep the 48 volt batteries charged up. I have a 300 watt solar panel that's pretty much ideally set up for direct charging a 48 volt battery. That's we're in the backyard, and we have a 600 watt chicken coop. And,
What does that mean, a 600 watt chicken coop?
it means we have two 300 watt solar panels on the roof of it, and I can also charge the batteries right back here. Same setup, simple solar charge controller. You can just wheel the battery back, the bike back, or hook the battery up, and makes it fairly quick and easy.
So why is it you're charging on a solar charger on the roof of the truck and a solar charger here?
I don't have to use any grid electricity for my transport, so it can be totally solar powered off grid.
So one panel, one battery per day, as much as you want to ride, basically.
Right. Basically, all a person needs is one solar panel and one battery, and they can handle a 30-mile commute like I do.
Sweet.
Want to try 2,000 watts?
Sure. How can you go wrong going from 500 watts, you said, set up to 2,000 watts?
Yeah.
So what's interesting is that's small motorcycle speed on a bicycle.
Right.
So the nice thing about electric bicycles is you can get lost twice as fast as you used to get lost.
Yeah.
Let's find our way home. Pardon? All right, what did we learn? Well, I learned that I don't need a donor bike, but I need everything else that you did to do it. 1,000 watt motors are a pretty good option. They're pretty generic, and then I can tune the power up using the controller to whatever level I want. That
48 volt is a good idea.
48 volts is a good idea. For me, in the early incarnations, wanting to lower the cost, in the basic version, I probably want to have a smaller 48 volt battery size. But there are lots of choices there. Lots of places to get the parts, etc. The bikes are kind of heavy, but they go as quick as you want to go. And your bikes are heavy because these conversion kits and the very high-powered battery sizes you want for long commutes make them heavy. For me, my first prototype is going to be heavy just because I'm going to make it out of rough parts.
So it doesn't really matter. Yeah,
It doesn't really matter.
The thing is, you also learn that you might as well use a cheaper steel frame bicycle, and the weight of the bicycle, it doesn't matter as much once you have the heavy motor and the battery. So also the steel frames may be actually a little better hauling the weight. So cheap is better actually in some cases.
In some cases, yeah. And that having a pedal bike with these conversion kit motors, that's kind of tough because pedaling over the motor inertia when it's not powered is kind of an issue.
Yeah,
but
it's a workout, but you can do it.
You can do it. But if you give it any power at all, if you have any juice at all, and then you're pedaling, your pedaling is immensely amplified.
Yep.
So, pretty good. Hey, Tim, thanks. That was fun.
All right.
It's fun to ride them. They're amazingly quick machines you built.
Okay.
Kind of nuts, too. So, you know what I'm supposed to tell people in the camera?
What?
I'm supposed to tell them that if they've got questions, they should put them in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also supposed to tell people on the camera that if they want to join a conversation, they should subscribe. What else are you supposed to tell people on the camera?
I don't know. It's your show.
You're supposed to tell them, hey, there are lots of ways to get around. Build your own bike.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Hey, Tim, thanks.